What will the future of real estate look like? Is conventional real estate dying? Join us while we dive into conversations to explore that very question and attempt to demystify current and potentially new real estate trends with the disruptors themselves. Hi, Jeff. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hop into this conversation with you. Our listeners are curious about other experts in the field and other disruptors and where they kind of think the industry is going. As you know, you've been in the industry for quite some time, so you've probably saw lots of changes. So before we get into that, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
My name is Jeff Jackson. I'm a founder of a company called Bode. We're a startup based in Calgary, Alberta. I've been part of real estate, as you say. I've got a few gray hairs now.
Don't we all?
I first started in 2007, so it's been about 15 years. I started on the commercial side with Avison Young, doing commercial office leasing, and kind of realized very quickly that the commercial side was not what excited me about real estate. So left that, traveled for a while, and came back and still had an active license. So started kind of playing around with residential real estate and really enjoyed that aspect, that side of the business, and have been kind of doing it ever since, but in a lot of different respects over the last 10 years.
I didn't know actually you were in commercial before, so that's good to know. I'll pick your brain on that another time.
Sounds good.
So you've started a couple brokerages over the past decade as well. So you haven't just been involved in residential real estate. You've been kind of pushing the needle and trying different things out, which is super cool. Do you want to touch on that just a little bit before we get into Bode?
Yeah, for sure. So when I first moved over to the residential side, I was with Century 21, a respectable brokerage in the city. And I was there for a few years and kind of just got my feet wet there. But I wanted a challenge, and I wanted to conduct my business a little differently than how I watched other people conduct their business. So I started my own brokerage in, I think it was 2010. I was 25 or 26. I think I was the youngest broker in the province at the time. I suppose I just liked challenges. So I wanted the challenge of running my own office. And I never started that brokerage with the idea that I'd attract a lot of agents there. I just wanted something that I could use for myself. And it turns out that I did start to attract some agents who kind of believed the things that I believed. Fast forward a few more years into running that office, I was approached by an agent who worked with Sotheby's. And, Sotheby's came to Calgary. And when it first came here, I think a lot of people were like, they didn't associate the name with real estate. They really associated the name with art and diamond auctions, those types of things. To be part of that brand, it costs a lot of money. And that year, that agent had paid something like $70,000 in fees.
Isn't it crazy? That is something that people don't understand about real estate. I'm like, people are like, real estate agents make a lot of money. Sure, but there are so many fees and so many hidden costs that people don't know about. And depending on the brokerage setup, it can be costly, as you said.
Well, in the last few years, we could have a whole podcast on that topic alone, right? Mm-hmm. The trend to EXP and real in these brokerages, that really there is a lot of cost pressure on that. And I would say specifically on the splits. Anyhow, this great business partner, she was looking at these $70,000 of fees and saying, well, I could just create my own brand with that. So I had the experience and the broker's license and the knowledge of that side of the business. She brought more of the marketing. So we ended up rebranding into Charles, which was really a boutique brokerage that really focused on local market knowledge. We built that up to about 35 or 40 agents.
Which is great. And that's a good size brokerage.
It still is. It's a really great team. Everyone kind of shared values in terms of how real estate sales should be conducted. And it was a lot of fun. But I think I just kind of, there was a few reasons, but I kind of burnt out at one point. I was managing my own sales. I didn't have a lot of support kind of on the admin or brokerage side, and also was, dealing with a lot of the conveyancing. So I had a lot of hats on and kind of burnt out at that time and wanted to find a new challenge. Mm-hmm. So I had talked about my frustrations in the industry to friends and colleagues. That was really the genesis for the idea behind Bode, was just how could we do this different and apply some technology to real estate sales.
clearly you've also have taken some of the marketing from Charles. Like your marketing at Charles was awesome. And your marketing at Bode is also top notch. And it's funny to see the signs because they're very unique. So you must have picked up some learnings there as well that you could apply. Like anything, we all go through life and pick things up to apply in the next. So it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always phases of it. Like I think about, whether it's the Bode brand or Charles brand, any company I've been part of, I can always kind of point to a V1.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
you get like 70% of the way there,
Yeah.
but you never get it right on the
Mhm.
first bag. Like sometimes it's just colors, right? Like you don't get the colors right, or you don't get the slogan right, or whatever it is. And
Mhm.
but that's okay. Like as long as you know that you're probably going to be doing a V2, that's okay.
Yeah,
So
at least a V2. There could be like
at
5.
least. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are feeling that pressure right now with video becoming more and more prominent. I know I am. Anytime I do a video, I kind of freeze up and I hate it. I'm like, oh my gosh, why do I have to do this? But what I've heard, and I'm not there yet, I think that's V5. You just get more and more comfortable. We'll see if that happens. But I think it
Yeah,
sounds like it's the same thing.
absolutely.
So, what makes Bode different? Can you tell the audience that maybe aren't so familiar with Bode, explain a little bit about what its value add is?
It's quite a different model. It's disruptive in a sense. There's been a lot of disruptive models. Some come, some go. I would put it in the list with WeList and Comfree and Purple Bricks, now Fair Square. I would say with all of those models, there's a step in the direction of some disruption, but they all still involve agents. So what we've done is actually, I would say, take a leap in the direction of disruption and say, okay, if sellers are given the tools and contracts and data, can they do this on their own? It's kind of silly, but sometimes I think of it like that expression, give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. Like we're kind of out there, and my mission is to teach people to do this on their own, because in so many walks of life, we are doing that, right? It's in banking, in investing. There's this trend towards disintermediation. Even Uber is an example of that. You don't call taxi dispatch, you're literally just calling your driver, calling through the app. So in general, I think that the real estate world is going two directions. There's going to be one which is very boutique, very high touch, and then there'll be this other direction which will be more DIY, call it, where people will have the access, they'll have the data to do more of this work on their own. So the way we operate, we work under the legislative framework of a mere posting, which is the result of a consent agreement between the Canadian Real Estate Association and the Competition Tribunal from about 12 years ago. That was a very public court case. It was an abuse of dominance court case that basically said that the necessity of hiring an agent to get to realtor.ca was an abuse of dominance, and the solution was the mere posting. So the mere posting allowed sellers to opt to pay less to get sometimes limited services, but still have their property on realtor.ca. So that's a legislative framework by which we operate. Maybe more on a tactical level, what we do is we give sellers everything they need to market their property very professionally. We put them on realtor.ca, Kijiji, Zillow, Bode, our website, and 1,000 other listing websites. The way we do that is by turning on all the data feeds, something called the DDF, the Data Distribution Facility. Not all brokerages do that. So, when you list with certain brokerages, you don't get pushed to all of those platforms. Obviously, realtor.ca, that's the monster. That's the one that I'd say 98% of buyers are looking there.
At least in Canada, hey?
At least in Canada. I mean, in the US, it's very fragmented. There, you've got Zillow and Trivia and realtor.com. They're all actually fighting for eyeballs. But here we have this really amalgamated database of properties listed. And we do that. Where we're limited is in giving advice. So the client relationship that an agent has with their seller, they have a fiduciary duty to that seller. Where we're limited is that we can't be seen as working and representing the seller. So the seller is given everything they need. We have a full team of support and success that can guide that seller through the process, but we are just slightly limited on saying, well, we think you should accept this offer, or we think you should reduce the price to X.
I've actually done a deal with Bode and it was pretty seamless.
Oh, yeah?
I have a tiny human here.
Hey.
Mom, what is it?
It's a microphone.
Can I try?
No, not right now. She was at the park, I swear. No, it was
No, good.
really seamless actually. And it was in my neighborhood. And so I can wave the Bode banner a little bit. And even though it is disruptive to the agent relationship, I didn't necessarily feel that. So
Yeah, I think sometimes the seller is the best person to sell their home. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are assholes out there, but there's assholes in every industry, right?
100%.
But if you think about, the seller, and we've heard that feedback quite a bit. Like we had a really good experience working with the seller because the seller knows to close the store, you just got to jiggle this a little bit. Or, the number 13 bus comes by every 8 minutes. There's certain things the seller
The intimate details, right? That the agent may not necessarily ask unless requested. Those intimate details do make a difference. The only time that it could be sticky is, those really passionate sellers are like, this home is worth $1 million. And you're like, no, it's not.
We all have this bias, and I just went through it and I overpriced my home.
An emotional attachment, right?
It's an emotional attachment. And when you think about it, it makes total sense because you bought that house. So at one point in time, you valued that home more than anyone else in the market. Yeah. So it only makes sense that when you go to sell, there's a good chance that you're still going to value it more than, the average person in the market. And that's where we just try to really lean on data. And every time something sells in the area, we're letting sellers know, here's what sold, here's what is selling, here's what's failing to sell, and here's what your competition is. So always keeping them, apprised of the market.
Yeah, the whole knowledge is power type thing, right? Back to your teaching them to fish analogy. What would you say is your biggest challenge right now? We all know that the market's changing. We're seeing some pressure with everything that's happening, so much political uncertainty. What do you think is the biggest challenge we're facing in not only the industry, but also let's look at it from a micro with Bode, what separates that, or what are maybe some unique challenges that Bode specifically might face?
We've lived through this wild market.
Are you tired? Because I'm tired.
Yeah, I am a bit tired. COVID hit and the sky was falling, right? There were no real estate sales. And then that just accelerated and it went crazy as buyer preferences really changed, right? People wanted a yard. They wanted a home office.
A little tractor.
Yeah, a little tractor. Home gyms became really important because all the spin studios and yoga studios were closed down. It really shifted buyer preferences. There was a mass exodus from the urban core. Statistically, people were leaving because, if you think of why people sacrifice living in, let's just use Calgary as an example. You can get a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo for $480,000, quite nice, 1,000 square feet downtown. The reason you do that is because, you can walk to work. There's a spin studio in your basement or on the main floor.
Happy hours close by.
You walk places. Yeah. But when all of those things close, the allure to living in I call it a box in the sky, really goes away. So now areas like Airdrie and High River and Okotoks, people said, well, that 480,000 actually gets me a 2-story, 2,200 square foot house with a double detached garage and, a big yard. Well, that became way more important as people were not, commuting to work. We're starting to see that reversal again and people kind of return to the cores. We follow that data quite closely. But to come back to your question, the challenge, I guess, what I like about our model is that I think that we perform quite well in hot markets. What Toronto and Vancouver have experienced over the last 5 years, there's not been a lot of, I would call it, salesmanship, because when you post to the system, to realtor.ca, for most sellers, as long as they weren't totally out to lunch, they were just evaluating offers. It was just a process of, you knew you were going to have multiple offers and you were evaluating them. So I think, a lot of sellers are equipped to take that process on. And then, of course, now as things start to shift, and they definitely have in Vancouver and Toronto, and they're shifting in Alberta as well. In markets like that, I think that sellers are looking at alternatives, right? Where things are a little bit not as hot. Well, how can I preserve as much equity as possible? So that's where I think that a model like ours kind of does well in a down market as well.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see both sides because in the hot market, they're like, why am I paying for somebody to not do a lot if I have the tools to do it myself? And then secondly, people are looking to save money right now. Budgets are
For
a
sure.
thing again. People are looking to maybe cut their cable or cut costs right now because there's so much uncertainty and the job market is changing in some areas and the political landscape is just straight bananas. So people are looking at all their options from like a 50,000 foot level over the past, let's call it decade to 15 years ish. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
People say the real estate industry has failed to evolve because
we hear that all the time.
Right. And I think that's a bit of a misnomer because I actually think the real estate industry has evolved a lot, even since my time in it. But the evolution has, in a lot of respects, really been to the benefit of the industry and not to the benefit of homeowners. So I don't know if maybe that answers the question. It's not really something I've learned, but it's something I've observed. Like I bought my first place in Calgary when I was, I think, 21 or 22. And that little condo was $130,000. I even think back to that process. I worked with, she's still a good friend of mine. She was my agent at the time. And there was a lot more salesmanship involved. That agent actually sat with the seller at the kitchen table and negotiated a deal in real time, which just doesn't happen anymore. And that's where I think the salesmanship has left the industry. I don't work as an agent any longer, but I just negotiated a deal and it just brought me back memories of like how little there is. Like I was dealing with the listing agent on this property that I purchased, and we had one conversation during the negotiations. Took a long time. The negotiating that took place was screenshots of texts from the sellers. It felt like such a intermediary, like not even color to here's the seller's position, simply here's exactly verbatim a screenshot of what the seller is saying. And
that is sad.
I don't know.
I know the area that you bought in, so that is not a good representation whatsoever, especially when you're dealing with homes in that particular area as well. So that's, wow, what a disservice. That's all I can say to that. To touch on that, do you think part of the problem is with Alberta, and I'm also licensed in BC, so at least their requirements to enter the industry are a little bit more stringent, but in Alberta and other jurisdictions, it's a pretty low bar. Do you think that's part of the issue? It's not like when you go to another job, you need X amount of experience or this education. Low barrier of entry, we'll call it.
It is low barrier of entry. And it's also a very appealing profession to be part of. I mean, I think back at the commissions that I used to earn while still enjoying a very flexible lifestyle. And so I never blame people for wanting to enter the industry. But because it's a low barrier entry in Alberta, especially when the economy shifts and people are looking at, maybe they've been laid off and they're saying, well, what can I do? What can I quickly get into? That is where you see a lot of new entrants into the market. I think the low barrier to entry doesn't necessarily help the reputation of the industry.
I mean, that's definitely what I struggled with when I was thinking of the career shift, because I had terrible stereotypes in my head of realtors. And I was like, oh, heck no, I'm not that. But it's my mission to disrupt that and show people like not everyone is going to screenshot and use that as negotiations. So I think that touches back on the future of real estate may kind of be two-tiered to that more boutique, hands-on, relationship-focused, and then sort of a Bode model or something similar. And I mean, there's a lot of other disruption happening in the market. Multi-generational families all living together, like that's going to change things. Anything else that you can see from your perspective? Any other sort of emerging trends, we'll call it?
Well, the one that I kind of love watching, it's kind of like watching a train wreck occur in real time, is iBuying, of course, which Zillow has lost a small fortune trying to do. I think Compass is involved, Open Door in the US, really tracking this iBuying trend, which is you have a house, don't worry about going to market, we're just going to give you an offer. It's a very clean, the offer might be 90% of value, but this is going to be the simplest way for you to transact. By all accounts, it's not been working very well. That's a trend that I continue to enjoy watching. I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's the future of real estate. I think the future of real estate is more efficient transactions. So not so much ease. Certainly there's some people, whether it's pre-foreclosure or following a divorce or a job loss, it does not matter. They're not trying to maximize value. But I think there's this big portion of the market who would say, I'm willing to do some of this work. I'm comfortable in this space. Because I buy and sell my own cars, most cars now, really all that research happens online. It's not like you're walking through a dealership any longer. I think more and more people will be comfortable in that, especially after you've done it once or twice. I think the Canadian Real Estate Association loves to kind of fear monger. And if you've seen those ads, it's like, don't go it alone. This is really, really scary. Where I would say for a portion of the market, it's not that scary. It's more nuanced than buying or selling a car, especially if you've done it once or twice. Most people, I think, are going to build that skill set and be happy to work on their own.
The car is a good example, the buying and selling of a car. And especially now with this new luxury tax, I think you'll start to see even more of those luxury vehicles changing hands privately to avoid the luxury tax, which, again, whole different conversation that we can talk about.
Yeah.
If people want to learn more about Bode, so, maybe they're thinking of buying or selling or just kind of get more information. You guys are located in BC as well. You operate in both BC and Alberta. Is that correct? Is there anywhere else?
Yes, that's right. So our registration is pending in Ontario. We service not Vancouver Island yet, but we can service about 95 to 97% of mainland BC. So most of our activity there has been Vancouver and the Okanagan.
Busy markets.
Yeah, very busy markets. And the Okanagan board just amalgamated with the Kootenay board and Kamloops. So that actually increases our availability to those markets and also to the data that helps our sellers.
I'm a part of the Kootenay board. So when they merged with the Interior, I was very excited.
Yeah, there's quite a few Calgary agents that, sell Fernie as well, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. We have your website. I'll link it in the show notes. I'm sure you're all over social.
Our best social is, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. YouTube to a lesser extent, but all of those links are on our website, which is just bode.ca.
Any advice or books, or what is Jeff reading these days, or what would Jeff recommend to our audience on if they're interested in business, personal development, real estate?
The guy that I think I have the most respect for in terms of industry change and just what's happening, he has a real focus on iBuying and power buying, is a guy by the name of Mike Del Preet. Okay. He speaks at the Inman conferences. Check out some of his stuff. I don't know if he charges really for any of the info, but he has a ton of info that's just free. So yeah, Mike Del Preet, he puts out some reports. I'd get on his mailing list because he puts out a lot of really valuable information. Books. This one is kind of a classic. I tend to recommend books that I have read more than once. And I feel like I'm due to read this one again. I've done it a couple times. It's called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, who I think was part of PayPal in early days.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And it's really about monopoly and the horizontal versus vertical integration of companies. And I think there's a lot of really interesting parallels to real estate. And if you read that book with a real estate background, it's super interesting. I just finished another one that there's some books that I feel you don't need to read cover to cover.
Yeah, I know. You can cherry pick a chapter based on table of contents.
Totally. But it was Extreme Ownership, which is basically applying Navy SEAL strategies to business and what I think is actually, extreme ownership and taking responsibility for outcomes. Like I said, that one, not a cover to cover type book, but definitely one to get the show notes or Cole's notes on.
There's definitely been a few books like that over COVID. I think I picked up reading as much as I ever have. And Bob always makes fun of me because I'm like, I'll be skipping through things. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I got what I needed. I'm moving on.
Yeah. I think it's a good way to approach it.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Honestly, this has been awesome. We'll have to do another follow-up. There's lots of other topics that I think we could really dive into, but I really, really appreciate you sharing your time with us, and good luck on the move.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much for joining the conversation and exploring both current and predicted future real estate trends. Want to keep the conversation going? You can find us, Future RE, on both Instagram and TikTok.